Hello! I'm Elaine, and I'm a tour guide in the French Quarter. I do ghost tours. And I am not going to tell you the stories that I tell on my tour, because you gotta pay for those. But if you want to hear some interesting things that have happened to me while I'm leading random drunk people around the French Quarter, I got you.
Okay, so I had a not great tour the other night. It started, it was just a weird day. It was one of those days that I was only going to work if we sold a certain number of tickets, and it was really close to the right number, so I had to get ready as if I was going to work without any knowledge of if I actually was going to go to work, which always annoys me. But I knew I was going to be working the later tour, so it didn't really matter. I was going to have to get ready eventually anyway. And so I was getting up, getting ready, and I look at the clock and I'm like, oh, I should know by now. And I look and we have not sold the tickets, so I settle back down to what I was doing, which was just sitting on the bed disassociating. But then, like 4 or 5 minutes later, I get curious about, like, hey, I should check to see how many guests we have on the later tour just out of curiosity. And I click in the app and I'm like, oh my God, no, we did sell enough tickets. So I had to very quickly finish getting ready and rush down there. And then to make it even better, I get down there and, like, we're missing so many people when it's getting close to start time. Like, so many of the people have not shown yet. And, like, of course, for this company, the office calls the people if they're not there within a certain time period and asks, like, you coming? Are we waiting for you or not? And the two bigger parties that we were missing, which were both parties of four, did not answer. So we had no idea if they were coming or not. And considering we were so close to not needing me, there was a chance that I wasn't going to work now that I'd been down there. And, like, we were messaging the office being like, hey, do you want us both to work? Do you want me to work? Do you want the other guy to work? What do you want to happen? And they are very kind. So they were like, you came down here. You're both working. It's just you might end up with smaller groups. And I'm like, understandable. And I take the smaller group mainly because I felt a little bit guilty because I sort of felt like I'd backdoor ended up working. I don't know. But that also meant I was primarily waiting for one of the parties of four. And everybody else finally did arrive right before we got started, except for my last party of four. And I go and start the rules, and I start the introduction, and I'm about halfway through the rules when the party of four walk up. And I'm like, are y'all here for the tour? And they try to walk by me to be like, yeah, but we're with the group that left. And I'm like, no, you're with me. Are you here for this company? And they were like, yeah. And I'm like, then you're with me. And they're like, but I thought we were supposed to go with the one that already started. I'm like, yeah, we already started. That's what's happening. But I signed them in, and I'm like, okay, what you've missed so far is the beginning of the rules, which basically amount to, don't be an asshole. But I start telling the rules again from where I was, and I notice that they are sort of chatting with each other and barely listening. But I'm like, okay, it's okay. They just arrived. They're settling in. It's okay. And then it's time to start the first story. And it's important to know that this was a Sunday, and on Sundays, in Armstrong Park, which is where this tour starts, there are often drum circles because that's where Congo Square is, and that's a very, important place in New Orleans history, and drum circles have sort of always been part of the culture there. These are very, culturally significant drum circles, and so that is playing in the background while I talk about what this place is, which I love. It gives such good vibes, such good energy. It's perfect. And I keep noticing that the girls who arrived late are just in the back of the group, twerking and dancing, and, there's just something that feels faintly inappropriate about this, and I'm like, guys, this is not club music, this is, but, it's fine, dance, enjoy yourself, as long as you're listening and not disrupting anyone. I don't care. They weren't listening, but the second part's more important. As long as they're not disruptive, I'm willing to ignore it. And we finished that first stop, and I head off to the second one, and they're sort of lingering towards the back, and I'm already thinking, okay, so they're leaving. They're not interested in this. I am a bit curious why they rushed over if they were not going to pay any attention, but whatever. And we get to the next stop, I start talking, and they are just like a good 2 feet away from any of the other guests, all clumped together and just obviously talking to each other. And I keep looking at the guests around them to make sure they're not being too loud, see if any of the guests look irritated, annoyed, or anything like that. And there was one guy who kept looking at them, but he clearly had an expression of like, what are you doing? Less than an expression of like, I'm annoyed. So I sort of just let it go and kept going. And also, that spot was still pretty loud, so I was having to speak pretty loudly anyway, and I figured if they were still being a problem when we got to the next stop, which was more in the interior of the quarter and therefore a lot quieter, I would pull them aside and be like, guys, you've got to stop. But I finished that story, we head off to the next location, and they are so far behind the rest of the group that I'm sure they are leaving. Like, they are just going to be walking away. They're not part of the group anymore. And we gather at the next location. I have everybody gathered in close, and they are sitting on a stoop like 3 houses down. Not 3 houses, 2 houses down. But, far enough away that I really doubt they can hear me in any kind of real way. And they're just chatting with each other. And I'm like, okay, so they're not part of my tour anymore. I can now completely ignore them. Except for the fact that one of them was sitting facing us. And every now and then when her friends got too loud, she'd like turn and hit them. And I'm like, sweetie, if you want to be part of the tour, come join the damn tour. But she did not. They just sat there, and every now and then one of them would get really loud, like the kind of loud that you get when you are too intoxicated to understand volume anymore. And her friends would all be like, shh, we're still on a tour. And I'm like, no, you aren't. And it was just a lot, but also there was every signal in the known universe that they were not going to follow us to the next stop. So I was like, okay, if they look like they are following us at the next stop, I will address this before we start the next story. And we head across the street to the house because we're at Marie Laveau's house. And I notice that they do not follow us. And once we're all parked on the other side of the road, they just turn and walk away. And I left a couple of quarters as a little thank you gift for Marie Laveau because I'm just going to assume it was her looking out for me. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and be sure to check out my book, Drunks of the French Quarter Theater, available on Amazon, bookshop.org, Barnes & Noble, pretty much wherever.